All right, we are started, and that is some really good sync. So we're in for a treat here. All right, so I talked a little bit about stage one in the last run, but I'll mention a few other things that bear repeating. So the slopes in this game are interesting. So you run slower on a slope, so you want to jump as much as possible when you're going up slopes. But because grenades are falling on your head, you have to be very careful about timing your jumps. The first gun that you want to pick up is the flame gun. That gun is a little bit tricky to pick up because you've got to do a horizontal shot on the pod before it reaches the slope. And the slope actually, as you see, actually absorbs your shots in this game, so you can't do it too early, too late. And then coming up, this is the tricky jump here. So Yumashev gets it, but had to pause a little bit. So you have to jump over that gap and time a charged shot to be able to get through there without stopping. And it's really tough. Dan is arch to the boss, and everyone else is not too far behind. This boss is pretty straightforward, so some charge shots, and that takes care of the core pretty easily. Yumashev not too far behind. Alright, and so on to stage 2. So this is another stage where having good weapons helps a lot and makes things a lot easier. So it looks like Yumashev and Stans are trying to stick with the flame gun. This does make stage 2 a bit harder. You have to be a little bit more precise with your shots, and it gets a little tricky with the dodges. This particular turret can be a lot of trouble, so you'll see Yumashev takes it out with a flame, and then that item clear is so good because if any of these enemies shoot a bullet straight to the center, it's curtains. It's pretty rough. It's like typical Fantasy X had a reset, but she'll be back in stage 2 in no time. And there we go. Alright, so coming up on the jungle. So jungle's also a pretty tight stage. What's interesting about jungle, as you see, is those ground turrets. The front part of the turret doesn't have a hitbox, so you can just jump on top of it even if you don't kill it, so that's pretty handy. Having the charged flame shot is pretty good for these enemies because the charged shot actually pierces. So if you've got a huge wave of enemies behind you, you can shoot one charge shot back and it'll take out the whole group. Alright, Stans and Yumashev are through. We call this part here the conga line because you get so many enemies spawning behind you and it's pretty tough. Yep, looks like they're through without too much trouble. The way that the flame shots scatter does make it nice when you're dealing with so many enemies behind you. And Stans almost died there, but he made it through. It's just a little close on the mid-boss kill. It is possible to kill it before you have to duck again, but it's pretty tight, especially with fire. And yeah, by being on the right side of the screen, you can avoid having to deal with the crumbling ledges, and that saves you a lot of grief. This boss here is pretty straightforward with the charged flame shots, so just a couple of those, and that takes care of it. Alright, so on to stage 3. So the bubbles with flame are really tough. So it's true that the flame shots disperse. Oh man, yeah. So Stan got lucky. Yeah. So on the first set of bubble, the bubble spawns short, It didn't go all the way down into the side, and that allowed stands to get through without dying, but the opposite happened the second time, and that's how we lost fire. Yumashev, on the other hand, does have fire, and let's see if he's going to do what I think he's going to do. So there's an elevator glitch that you can do, and it involves destroying something on a specific frame. If you hit it, it saves 20 seconds. If you don't, there's not too much of a penalty for it. Well, there's not really a penalty, but it kind of negates some of the benefit of toughing it out, doing stages 2 and 3 with a flame gun. Let's see if he can hit it this time. Nope. Right. It's a frame perfect trick. Alright, so while we're waiting for the long elevator section, let's see what typical Fantasy X is up to. She gets through the first section there, no problem. Oh, yeah, Fantasy got through both bubble sections, so you need a combination of precise shots and a little luck. You can't shoot, the flame gun doesn't shoot that fast. You kind of have to rely on the way that the shots scatter to be able to get through the bubbles without dying, and also just gotta pray for good luck. Those barrels have a hitbox as they're falling, but as soon as they explode, the explosion doesn't actually kill you. It's interesting. Alright, so coming up on the boss here. Because the pillars are not vulnerable when they're down, you kind of have to balance between... You do the most damage when you're pointed up, jumped up, and shooting straight, because the spread of the gun hits multiple pillars, but you're also vulnerable, so you kind of have to balance the two. Alright, so coming up on the climb here. So, as I mentioned last time, this climb is really tough. So yeah, Stan's got a rough spawn, and there's so many bullets, there's so many enemies, and you have to be a little precise. Luckily, he was able to pick up the spread, and oh, he almost missed that jump. He made it, though. Stans and Yumashev are pretty close. If you are moving in the same direction of the slope in Super C and you jump onto it, sometimes you can catch the slope a little bit sooner than you otherwise would be able to. It caught Yumashev by surprise there. And these two are very, very close, and typical Fantasy on the boss. Now, in case you're wondering, why don't the players keep fire if fire is so great? And the reason, two reasons. One is it's harder, but the other reason is that when you get to, not this stage, in Area 7, there's a slime section. The flame shot only does 1 damage to each of the parts of the green slime that you have to go down through the tunnel through, and that's no good. So you need something like Spread or the machine gun to get through it real fast. And coming up here are the mouse, and this is a nerve-wracking part of the run because the mouse can basically spawn right on top of you. So Stance has another opportunity to pick up the spread. Let's see if he manages to. He does. That was a good pickup. It is pretty close here. Alright, yeah, the boss on this stage is pretty straightforward. He can't hit you from certain spots, and point blank spread gets the job done pretty quickly. Yeah, Stans and Yumashev are very tight. Alright, so this next section, this stage is just a complete brute force mash as fast as you can. So those purple pillars have a lot of health, and you've got to kind of, sometimes you may want to stutter so that you have a little extra time to take it out, and oh, you must have got tagged there, so that's unfortunate, but Stans also gets tagged. There's so much happening with each of the shots, because you want to go right, you don't want to lose any time, but being able to keep on top of enemies spawning behind you while this happens is tricky. And yeah, there's this spread gun, and that's going to be really what you want to hold on to for the rest of the stage. And Typical Fantasy X is through the next stage, and she's still got spread, so if she can hold on to it, she has a chance to make up a lot of ground here. Oh, you wish I've lost spread just before the boss, so that's going to be challenging for sure. Alright, so doing this next boss with Pea Shooter is tricky. So if you have spread, you can take out, so the boss has slime that comes down and these little projectiles that seek after you. Spread just kind of makes it trivially easy, but with Pea Shooter, you've actually got to do the timing. And let's see, so Stance is on the last stage. The jumps in this stage are unbelievably tight. Alright, now there is a glitch that you can do. Let's see if Stans is going for it. Alright. So this, we call it the scrolling glitch. So after, you're going to see the ceiling come down on Stans in a very strange fashion. Now. Oh. Alright, so this is tricky because if Stans dies while the ceiling is in the glitch state, he will completely soft lock the game. And oh, no. Alright. Yeah, that's rough. It is brutal. So unlike so many of the other stages, when you go through that ceiling glitch, you've only got Pea Shooter. So the reason why you might have noticed that Stans was trying to pause the game, the way that Super C does collision is a little bit interesting. So if you are stuck in a solid object, the way that Super C deals with this scenario, unlike say Mega Man, like Mega Man games where like it pushes you out, in Super C, if you are stuck in a solid object, the game responds to that by just killing you. And it kills you, and then you just respawn in an area that's in bounds. So the way that the game decides, the way that I'll say the timing of when the game only checks to see if you're in a solid object once every 8 frames. And so if you pause and unpause the game, you can have the game in a pause state while it checks to see if it should kill you. And if you time it properly, you'll be able to keep your weapon even though the ceiling would have otherwise crushed and killed you. It's pretty awesome. But the downside is if you mess up, then you've paused the game and you've lost a little time. If you manage to make it through, however, you'll be able to keep your fire weapon through that rough section. And we are pretty close here. Oh my goodness. Wow. Typical Fantasy made the comeback. Very, very impressive.
Окей, nice run. Окей.
Фэнтези вас пошла.
Ничего страшного.
Вы настолько на 8 уровне все.
У нее какой-то мэшинг.
three-way scroll. High position visual. Sound selective mode. It's a super AV action. Contra. ファミコン用カセットコントラ好評発売中。トナミ
You're good. You're good.
All right, thank you all so much for joining us. We are down to the deciding race for Super C. As you just saw, Super C is an absolutely brutal and punishing game, and you do the speedrun along the edge of a knife. Typical Fantasy X made an amazing comeback. Definitely one for the ages, and let us see if she can come out on top again or if Thumb Brothers is going to take it. So I think that we are ready.